Well, we are one step closer to legalized pot in this country. After months of research, Cabinet will finally see a report that outlines recommendation for rules around marijuana. Now, the Liberals, you'll remember, promised to introduce legislation to make it official next spring. But first, serious decisions need to be made on everything from the minimum age to how to prevent drug-impaired driving. Now, the task force's recommendations will be made public, but at a later date. So here to discuss is Bill Bogart. He's the author of Off the Street, Legalizing Drugs. He's also a law professor at the University of Windsor. Thanks for being here this morning.
Good morning.
The report is expected to be wide-ranging. Lots of research went into this. You know, they went down into the U.S., there's 5 doctors on this task force. Let's go through some of the things that it could include, starting with minimum age. What factors needed to be considered here?
Well, I think that there's some controversy about where the age should be set. But what I would say is the underlying issue is what's really important, and that is persuading young people not to use marijuana. We mustn't think that setting the age limit high, say at 21, will necessarily solve the problem. And indeed, it could reignite the illicit market. So if you don't convince young people not to use the drug, they'll go to the illicit market to get it.
So, you know, the largest consumption group right now in Canada, we know, is ages 15 to 24. You started at 21. That's a huge part of a high school population.
Yeah, and it's really the kids from, say, 15 to 20 that we have to be most concerned about, because young people should not be using this drug, Anne-Marie.
Well, we've known that for decades, but here we are at legalization.
No, I understand that. So what I draw out from that is prohibition hasn't done a very good job, right? We know that until recently, Canadian teens had the highest rate of consumption of marijuana in the developed world. Wow. Now, those figures have dropped a little bit in recent years, but there's now some evidence that they're migrating to other drugs, including opioids. So this is very concerning. We need a concerted effort to persuade young people that drugs are not the solution to whatever issues they have in their lives.
I want to get to your recommendations on some of the education around that in just a moment, but let's also take a look at what products might be allowed to be sold. This is a bit, you know, when you look at states like Colorado,
yes,
there's a huge industry around things like edibles. We're going to have legislation in place here, before the legalization happens.
That is correct. And again, edibles return us to kids, because edibles in some respects mimic candy and sweets, and so there's that sense to everyone.
And it's a treat.
Exactly. And so some jurisdictions have banned them, and people who have looked at this, like some think tanks in Britain, have said, you know, edibles should be prohibited. But again, the underlying idea here, Anne-Marie, is to persuade young people not to use this drug. Because if you ban edibles and you haven't persuaded them, they'll simply go to the illicit market.
All right, big question is also, where will people be allowed to access the marijuana? You know, we saw with the dispensaries in Ontario and across the country, they're in that gray zone right now, but once it's legalized, you know, you've got big pharmaceuticals like Shoppers Drug Mart who are looking to become an outlet as well. Yeah,
although I think Shoppers Drug Mart would probably want to focus on medicinal marijuana, which has a set of issues onto itself. I mean, the legal dispensaries, I think, have run themselves into trouble in terms of, you know, the police raids and selling recreational marijuana, at least some of them, when they purported to sell medicinal marijuana, and selling, in some instances, contaminated stuff. So their future is very much in doubt, I think, as a source for marijuana once it's legalized and regulated. There could be a number of models, and there could be diversity within the country, Anne-Marie, because remember, the provinces will have a say in all of this in terms of the actual sale of marijuana.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made, right? The illegal market is a $7 billion industry. That's a lot of money to be taken back if you are going to legalize.
That's right. And there's a lot of tax revenue to be had, Anne-Marie. It's not the rainfall that some people suggested at the beginning, but there is tax revenue, and as some of us argue very strongly that tax revenue shouldn't fall into the general coffers, but rather should be focused on the issues that legalization and regulation will give rise to. Like, again, helping to persuade young people not to use the drug. to provide treatment and counseling for those who might become dependent, et cetera.
All right, but you work with students in this age group, 15 to 24, right, as a professor. You also have a lot of research on harmful effects of marijuana. So, you keep saying you want them to focus on harm reduction. You want them to focus on getting them away from drugs. What do you know that could help persuade them?
Well, it's not so much I know, but it's other folks that have looked at this, such as the Open Society, which is the foundation funded by the billionaire George Soros. They've been looking at these issues for years and have come up with a number of recommendations that we could go through. But certainly one of them, Emery, is you have to differentiate between kids and kids at risk. Drug use can happen to any child, but some children are more at risk than others. It's very important to identify the kids at risk and then find ways to support them in meaningful ways that, and that these programs then are assessed in terms of their effectiveness. But we really want to go beyond these finger-wagging, just say no campaigns that really have not been effective. The other thing I would say, Anne-Marie, is that it's prevention of use, but at the very least, delaying onset. Because we know that the later an individual starts with a drug, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, etc., the less likely, all other things being equal, that they will become dependent.
So good to have you here, and this is a conversation we are going to be able to continue as we head towards next spring. Bob, thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for having me on.
All right, analysts say that the recreational marijuana industry has the potential to reach $6 billion in sales by 2021. There could be about 3.8 million legal recreational pot users across the country by that time.